Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
I had a lady once who had the hives all over her body all the time and had for 2 years. She was on medication to suppress the hives, which had made her fat. She'd gained 40 pounds in 2 years on this med. She was very depressed about that. She was frustrated and depressed. And so her physician said, "Hey, lady, you got your choice, be fat or have the hives." And when she told that physician that was depressing, he says, "I can write you a prescription for antidepressants if you want." So she's telling me the story. I said, "Well, we're going to run some labs, including the food sensitivity." And sure enough, she got off certain foods and her hives went away, like permanently, forever, like no more medication. She started losing weight. She started taking hot showers and working out to a sweat, which she hadn't done in 2 years, and on and on.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Gryn, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed D.R.E.S.S. He's a board-certified holistic health practitioner and certified nutritional therapist. He's also the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition and the FDN certification course with over 4,000 graduates in 50 countries. We discussed how he started FDN, along with what is metabolic chaos, how functional lab screenings can impact your health, the importance of food sensitivity tests, the cortisol to DHEA ratio, his D.R.E.S.S protocol, and his one tip to get your body back to what it once was. Really enjoyed my interview with Reed. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right. Welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Gryn, and I have D.R.E.S.S on. Reed.
Hello, Brian. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Welcome to the show. And Reed is a certified holistic health practitioner, also the founder of FDN, which I've been going through right now. I just got off one of my practicals and really enjoying that certification. So we're going to touch on all things health related. And welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
And you're based out of California. We were just talking. He's originally from the area, went to New Trier, Glencoe. So small world.
Yes, remarkable. And I think back with great fondness of my time spent in that area. I'm a Southern Cali boy now, though. Too much of a wimp to handle those winters anymore.
Yeah, and I was telling you, we're filming this in November, and it's 60, in the 60s. So not so bad here right now, but I'm sure in a month that'll change. Well, let's dive in. Obviously, your health journey has gone for how many years? 20, 30 years at least. When did you start getting into health and wellness? And I know first you started out in the environmental side of things, right?
The first time, actually, I was 19, so that's 50 plus years ago. And I read a book called Healing Ourselves. It was way, way ahead of its time. Again, 50 years ago, reading a book, Healing Ourselves. So that's had me paying attention for a long time about health and wellness and being responsible, trying not to do too much bad stuff unless I had a really good reason. And then, it was 25 years ago that I actually got into the business that became a health entrepreneur. And you're right. I went from environmental law, paralegal, conservation, and saving the whole planet, air, birds, water, trees, bees. And I started focusing on people. Well, if it's this harmful to the planet, what about us, including me? Brian, I didn't want anything sneaking up on me. I was in good health. I had never really been to the doctor, except for dental and some owies from sports and motorcycle riding. But yeah, so I didn't know what it was like till I switched careers, went into a wellness center. And that's when I got my holistic health practitioner and certified nutritional therapist and certified personal trainer. And I got 15 certificates in the next 10 years when I went into the health space. And I encourage everybody to get as much education as they can, whatever turns you on. If you have an interest, do it, and so after 10 years of working in this clinic, it was a wellness center, alternative health space. And I've watched it evolve from alternative, considered by some quackery, to complementary. Oh, this stuff works. Now it's integrative, later. And now it's functional and lifestyle medicine, these kind of things. So I think the story. I spent 10 years developing a system of lab investigation into what's really wrong with people instead of just treating symptoms and giving drugs. It's really alternative / functional / personal responsibility. And it's an amazing system that was created in that 10-year period.
And the interesting about FDN, because I've been going through the certification, is you talk about this metabolic chaos and that we don't necessarily treat anything specifically. Maybe explain a little bit. I thought that was a different way of looking at things, because I've been through other certifications, and maybe explain that a bit.
Well, sure. The pursuit of root cause was what drove me to discover metabolic chaos, or kind of coin that concept, if you will, or consideration. It's really what's called a construct in our way of thinking. So I wasn't a physician at this clinic. I was a nutritionist and trainer, but I really wanted to help people. I really wanted to get to the underlying causes and conditions. Instead, I'm not licensed. I can't just get out of, here's your prescription, and that wasn't working for people anyway. So what happened is that I ran labs, thousands and thousands of labs on thousands of people, and I recognized these patterns. Now, I was always, again, looking for that root cause. That was popular phraseology of the time. But man, what I discovered, well, this, Brian, that there's always multiple root causes or underlying conditions, always multiple. And here's something you won't hear anywhere else. They're having an effect on each other. And you can't even singly measure some of those effects that root causes are having on each other. And those root causes could be mental, emotional problems, psychospiritual. It could be physical trauma. Like my personal nemesis was that I was very hard on my body, the activities and things, the level of activity and stuff. So, and then not to mention, from my environmental background, the chemical stressors. What's in the environment is really toxic and poisonous. And we're the rats in the maze. We're the experiment. These things haven't been tested for safety. So what I noticed was all these causal factors, mental, emotional, and physical trauma, and chemical stressors and things, all had an effect. And they all contributed to each other's downward spirals. And so that's why I just called it, hey, this is just metabolic chaos. And that works perfectly with what's true. What reality is, it is chaotic, all these things interacting. And number two, it keeps you safe from ever being accused of practicing medicine without a license. They don't think that way. This is the real way things really work. But, medicine, the way it's practiced today, even by functional practitioners, is very fractional. They still specialize in whatever their training was. And you can go to one for their gastroenterological stuff, the gut stuff, but you need let's say an endocrinologist for that, or you need an orthopedist, or you need a psychologist or psychiatrist. So it's still very, very fractionated. So the idea behind FDN, functional diagnostic nutrition, is that we don't treat anything specifically. That's not our backyard. Our backyard is look at all of the contributors all at once, and then apply the principles of healing to every cell, tissue, organ, and system simultaneously through behavior. And that's why people get so much better so quickly. And so it's outperforming any other system.
How did you decide which tests to use, and how is that process? Because you have obviously like saliva hormone and, a metabolic wellness panel. Like, how did you decide, which test to use? And was that a trial and error basis?
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Mm.
Man, I have to give tribute to my mentors of the day. I developed a system out of all the labs I was running because I'm good at pattern recognition. But the actual training was by really smart people, Dr. Bill Timmons, Dr. Bill Bailey, and some others who were on the cutting edge. They put their own money into labs that no one else was running because they knew it was the right. And by the way, they had their own personal challenges. So a lot of this is driven by one's personal challenges and overcoming problems for oneself. And then guess what? You get to help others with it. So again, I didn't have any health problems like that, but I loved learning. I love the science, the anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and stuff. It's, to me, really fascinating. And I was able to take what I was learning from these scientists, researchers, lab rats, and all that kind of people, and they were doctors, and apply it in an office to people, like get the clinical, it's called clinical correlation, as you know. So the way we looked at lab tests was, whose test is this? It isn't to run a test and, oh, here, you need to buy this, you need to buy that, you got to go on this for 6 months. That's treating the paper. So we just look for clues and then guide people's behavior. And that has been systematized as well. The behavior program is also very well organized. The D.R.E.S.S, you know all about it. But so I chose the labs that worked for the population I was serving, which was mostly chronically ill, people caught in the cycle of trial and error, mostly women, I have to say, but all ages. But when it worked good, they brought me their kids, they brought me their husbands because they wanted them to do it too. But I ran the hormone testing, and that leads to looking at the immune system. That leads to looking at digestion and detoxification and so on. So we have this pattern that we recognize, and it just works. I was led by people smarter than me into the lab work, but I took it and ran with it from there.
And you mentioned one of the tests, like a food sensitivity testing, to uncover some of these healing opportunities. Is that something that like has evolved over the years, or how's the accuracy, and what are the thoughts around doing a food sensitivity test?
All right. Well, that's 4 different questions, but here you go. So I learned to run a food sensitivity test on every single person because everyone has some. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't create miracles in every person, but in some people it does. That food sensitivity, or 2 or 3, is exactly what's contributing to metabolic chaos in such a big way that their symptoms could be attributed to it. In other words, I had a lady once who had the hives all over her body all the time and had for 2 years. She was on medication to suppress the hives, which had made her fat. She'd gained 40 pounds in 2 years on this med. She was very depressed about that. She was frustrated and depressed. And so her physician said, hey, lady, you got your choice, be fat or have the hives. And when she told that physician that was depressing, he says, I can write you a prescription for antidepressants if you want. So she's telling me the story. I said, well, we're going to run some labs, including the food sensitivity. And sure enough, she got off certain foods and her hives went away, like permanently, forever, like no more medication. She started losing weight. She started taking hot showers and working out to a sweat, which she hadn't done in 2 years, and on and on. So this idea of food sensitivities, everyone has some, so you should test. Everyone should test, but it's only to the degree that those sensitivities are contributing to chaos and downstream somewhere there are symptoms. That's how much it will help you. So if those food sensitivities are major contributors, well, it's going to make some major changes in your life. If they're minor contributors, then you might not get such a miraculous outcome, but you're still removing a stressor. You're still removing a contributor. And oh, by the way, on that thought, to finish the thought, and you know this, Brian, that if you pay attention to what you eat and you feel better eliminating certain foods, substituting foods that make you feel good, especially, well, then you might pay attention to other things in your environment. Remember, I started out in the environment, and man, people start to realize, well, hey, these certain personal care products are bad for me. I feel worse on them than off them. Or maybe it's household cleaning products, and maybe it's new furniture and outgassing of clothing, or stuff you put on your hair. Well, if I had any, so when you pay attention, you do better. And the labs are a great way to get that going. So because we don't guess, we test.
And one of the tests you run is a cortisol to DHEA ratio. It's something I've talked about on this podcast before. I've had this individual, Georgie Dinkoff. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's one of the first people that brought that up to me. And cortisol is something that probably for, I don't know the percentages, but for a lot of people, it's probably out of range at some point, just because either overstressed lifestyle or restrictive dieting or over exercising or whatever it is. Is this something that I mean, obviously these are all foundations, but this is obviously one of the big foundations regarding FDN and their testing.
Well, yeah, because we want to know how badly a person's breaking down. People come to us not feeling fantastic. I'm great, I just want to run some labs. No, they come to us because they have a health problem or concern, and they want to change it. So they're looking to invest in data that they can't get anywhere else. So we run a number of labs looking for a constellation of healing opportunities. But one of the overriding concerns is catabolic state versus anabolic. So, there's catabolism and anabolism, not cannibalism. So, your body's constantly building up and breaking down and building up and breaking down. And the hormones primarily responsible would be cortisol. That's the stress hormone. And DHEA, which is the anabolic counter-regulatory hormone. So if you're out of balance, then you're in more of a catabolic state. It could be said and be true. And you don't even have to have high cortisol to be in a catabolic state. You could be in what they used to call adrenal fatigue. And so your cortisol is actually not high anymore. You're just not able to get there. But it's still very high in relationship to the anabolic hormones, the steroidal hormones that we make. So you're in a catabolic state. Well, that's part of a downward spiral. You could even say it's the beginning of a downward spiral. And when your cortisol is elevated relative to your DHEA, you're going to see problems in the immune system. The lining of the gut gets suppressed by this cortisol, and then you're not as immune as you were, and you get dysbiotic. In other words, the bad bacteria is able to take more of a foothold in your gut, so your microbiome's out of balance. Well, then along comes some parasites, bacteria, funguses, even viruses, and they can get more of a foothold in you. You're more susceptible. Well, then, all kinds of metabolic chaos occurs. There's a downward spiral. The good news is that we can interrupt it. We can say, hey, look, you're in this downward spiral. You feel like crap. The labs we run explain exactly why you feel so badly. And this is especially helpful for those who've been told by some other practitioner that their blood work looks normal. Everything's fine. Well, in other words, you're not diseased. And I would just add, yeah, not yet. Those kind of markers, they have to be so bad that you're already in a disease process. So now that's when medication is prescribed. Whereas we want to catch it before that. So our markers are much more sensitive, and they're looking for subtle changes and imbalances that can't be called a disease. That's the other reason we're not practicing medicine, is because It's all subclinical for the most, even though you're highly symptomatic. The ongoing disease processes, the metabolic chaos, is generally considered subclinical. So there's no medical diagnosis for these people. And it's billions of people, millions and millions and millions. Subclinical disease. You're not diseased enough yet for the physician to treat you.
Right. And some people might not have any, minor symptoms, but, getting ahead of the curve is, someone could be in an exhaustive state and they're so used to it, the day in, day out of it. And maybe they're running on caffeine half the time or whatever it is to help get through that.
They're self-medicating.
Yeah.
They're pouring down the coffee in the morning. They're drinking alcohol at night to relax, and it's a form of self-medication. And people in that state know they don't feel like they used to. They used to have more energy, more libido, more ability to put on muscle or work out or think clearly. Cloudy consciousness is a real problem. People are walking around in a daze, and then again, if it goes on long enough, they think that's normal. Yeah. They wouldn't have to do with a clear head. Whoa.
Now, did you have any big health epiphany for yourself, or do you continually or sometimes do these tests on yourself, maybe annually?
I have a sheet. The number of labs I've run on myself is ridiculous. Some I probably didn't need to do, but I like learning about labs. So I always use myself first. So, I could say when I first started in my late 40s doing the lab work, I felt great, didn't have any problems, didn't notice much. Actually used my own labs as examples for what good labs should look at. But and I'm 70 now. They say 70 is the new 50 or something, but 80 is 80. So I'm looking to get to 80 and feel as good as I did 10 years ago. Like if I'm functioning like a 40-year-old now at 70, what's it going to be like at 80? And then there's 90. And we're only designed to go so far. Thank goodness I have longevity in my genes. My mom is 93, still living. I'm going to see her for Thanksgiving soon, and
nice.
I just want to. So yes, I'm always running labs to answer your question, and I'm getting into some new markers that I'm going to be introducing to FDN. So the good thing about FDN is it's constantly evolving too. It isn't just look. I can teach you in 10 months what it took me 10 years of hard work in a clinic to learn. But it's evolved since that. We keep learning, we keep going on. So yes, it's an amazing education, as you could attest to, and so can we've trained 4,000 people in 50 countries, but there's about 1,000 who are very active practitioners, and that's my goal, to create more active practitioners. But my point was just that, of course, we keep learning, we keep working on ourselves. I run the labs. And now I'm getting more into the predictive markers, which are really early. If you read, your listeners probably would enjoy a book called Drop Acid, not for what it sounds like, but because.
Yeah, I've had him on. Yeah, I've had him on the podcast.
Oh, Promoter?
Yeah. Promoter. Okay, I've had Dr. Richard Johnson on. Maybe I got that confused,
and Johnson was a precursor, so he did the foundational work. So this idea of dropping our uric acid is critical. Physicians aren't anywhere near looking at that. They might run the test if you ask them to, but it's not a routine screening, and it should be for especially anyone my age.
And then you've talked about it a little bit with the gut, and you have the GI map, which is the lab that we run at FDN. What was that process like? Because I know the gut can be a tricky thing, and with pathogens and fungi, and as far as finding labs that are accurate and consistent over time.
Well, that's a very specific and sensitive test. Measures things, and some of them are more important than others. Getting a look at the balance of the microbiome is important, and getting a look at some of the possible pathology. I mean, it will identify, parasites, overgrowth of bacteria, funguses, and things like that. There's also some digestive markers on that. But I have to say this, that whole area of testing, stool testing, I think it used to be better. The old labs we used to run, which have just been phased out because they're too expensive. So we're now looking at this basically DNA, the PCR testing, and it's not perfect, but remember, we're just looking for clues. We're looking for in context of the other labs we run. Yeah, that's an important consideration. You definitely want to know how your body's handling these things, and if some of your symptoms might be related. In other words, that's one of the causal factors upstream. So we, just like we do a food sensitivity test on every person, we do the stool testing on every person, because you got to look. You can't guess about these things. So yeah, so there's different ways to look at it all. I really enjoyed the data, and by the way, I spent 10 years as a clinical advisor for one of these labs, 10 years working with doctors on going over lab results, teaching them what it really meant to the person. So I tried to teach them not to treat the paper. It's not just what's the agent, what's the dosage, what's the frequency, what's the duration, of some drug or medication. We don't work that way. What's going on in the body? Why do you have this overgrowth? What can we do to restore the ecology of the gut and the whole body to eliminate it and make sure it doesn't come back, and these kind of things.
And you have these functional tests, and then these lab tests, and then you talk about coaching up function. Maybe explain a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. Well, I was an old football coach for many, many years, and so I like the idea of coaching. But when I started, the word health coach wasn't around. I was a nutritionist who ran labs and a personal trainer. And I also did a lot of body work, myofascial therapy and things. Remember, I worked in a clinic for 10 years. So I got an opportunity to do a lot of things. And the idea of teaching people what to do at home became my focus. And so we'd run the labs and teach them what to do at home. Yeah, there's always treatment. You can come in for your chiropractic and acupuncture and massage and different modalities and things. And yet putting the responsibility back on the person is the only thing that really works. So, am I answering your question, or
coaching up function and within sort of the protocol of this D.R.E.S.S. So diet, rest, exercise, right? Stress reduction and supplementation.
Well, the funny thing is, as I just said, in my position in the office, I was the health director. I was directing all the traffic and practicing and running the labs and giving all of the consultations on those things that people could do at home. The other practitioners there were chiropractic, so people would come in for treatment for that thing, that pain or whatever it was. And I was sending them home with a lifestyle program. And so I said I was a coach. I used the term coach up function. Let's get the nerve flow going through chiropractic. Let's get the blood flow going through massage and exercise. Let's get everything else flowing. And so once you get established what needs to be worked on using the lab work and exams and other things, well, then it's what's the protocol? So we coach up function with the right diet, the right sleep, the right exercise. Reducing stress is more of a coaching down thing. So if you have dysfunction in the gut, you have parasites or biofilms or yeast overgrowth or all these things that we look at on paper and see, totally explains why you feel like crap. Well, let's coach down those things. That's different than just kill everything.
Yeah.
So chasing things out by changing the environment is a little safer, less toxic than just taking a drug to kill a parasite, for instance. So I
Looking
say
at like,
coach up
yeah.
function, coach down contributors to metabolic chaos. And thanks for reminding me of what a great system that is.
What about supplements? That's one thing I've noticed. With your D.R.E.S.S protocol, is obviously supplements are one piece of the puzzle.
But yeah, that was a full circle thing, Brian, where because when I first started working at that clinic, I went to classes that the owner said, "Hey, you can get." She was getting her diplomat in nutrition, and I was kind of allowed to participate as an assistant and get my nutritional status. And so, but you know what it was? It's a bunch of selling supplements.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's really what it boiled down to. Take some surveys, ask a few questions. Here, try this. Buy $500 worth of this crap and take it for 3 months. Well, people would buy a month's worth or maybe two, and they would feel better and think I'm cured, quit taking it, or it wouldn't work and they quit taking it.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, they quit taking it. So I knew that it wasn't the answer to it wasn't really addressing. So while supplements are part of the protocol, they're just 1/5 of it. It's D.R.E.S.S, which is diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction. Then the supplementation really works. And I had to really learn how to use the right supplements to, first of all, replace what's missing in food. So supplementation is great because you can get the extra vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids and antioxidants and trace elements, phytonutrients, and things that aren't in food anymore because food is not grown the way it used to be. The soils are depleted, so it's deficient. So you can substitute for what's missing in food. That's a good thing. But also, depending on one's condition, and the status, how you're doing, you might want to support your digestion better. You might want to stimulate the immune system. And again, you might want to coach down or chase away, kind of self-treat certain bacteria or viruses or even funguses and biofilms and things that are going on. So we use supplements as part of an overall lifestyle program. Then they tend to be much more effective. But on their own, you're just peeing away your money sometimes.
Yeah. And what about the gut-brain connection? Why don't you explain a little bit?
Yeah, I got one. Every time my stomach's empty, it tells my brain that I'm hungry. So
there you go.
It's really simple. It's not as mysterious as it might appear, this gut brain thing. So yeah, they talk to each other. And matter of fact, some say that the gut has its own brain. And so that's part of what's going on. The nervous system is highly involved. The nerve, which starts with the brain, the central nervous system. You get these big nerves that go down and keep things moving. The digestive system has to work on its own. You don't have to think about digesting your food and assimilating it and processing it all throughout your body. So that's all done through the autonomic nervous system, which is part of the brain and body. And so it's not the somatic part. Like if I think about it, I'll raise this hand, I'll grab this bottle and squirt this in my mouth. That's the somatic nervous system telling my muscles what to do. But the autonomic is what keeps your heart going. So it isn't just gut brain. It's the entire body being sort of regulated by the autonomic system. And there's other aspects too. But that's close enough for me for right now.
And what would you say, just on a personal level, how have you changed any of your like routines? We talk a lot about daily and evening routines. And I know you talk a lot about sleep hygiene. Like, what have you changed through the years? You're young, you look young, you are still, you're the, 50s, well, you're 70, but you really look 50, right? So what have you done through all your learning that has changed through the years?
Well, first of all, first of all, I married a young and beautiful woman
That
who,
helps, right?
and we stay active, and she's a practitioner too. We really care. We wake up every day and try to be loving and appreciative. So mindset is one of my biggest things. Yeah, I used to just slug through. I've had a couple other careers, and I was also mission driven and very dedicated to being the best at whatever I was doing, and things. So I've always been very driven. But this is deeper. This gets into the mental, emotional, spiritual, psycho-spiritual, if you want. The idea of communicating with the intelligence that created and runs the universe. That's kind of a deep thing. I'd say that doesn't sound like it's coming from a guy who teaches a course in anatomy and physiology and biochemistry, but it really is the answer to your question. I get up every day with a mindset that I can do some good in the world, and then my day's organized around that until I started around 4, and then by 2 o'clock I've got my day's work done, and I can go play and have fun and enjoy. They say put more life in your years, not years in your life. And so that's really the thing that's changed for me is uh, uh,
So it's
making sure.
more of a mindset
Yeah,
and
I don't work
gratitude.
12 hours a day anymore.
Yeah.
14 or 18. I have to get my outdoor time.
And in your book, you were one of the authors of this book called The Gap: Simple Steps to Reclaim Your Health and Reverse Most Chronic Diseases. What was the basis behind that book?
The basis is somebody asked me to write a chapter in their book. And I said,
Okay.
well, sure, I'll contribute, and I wrote about the dress for health success. Matter of fact, every one of your listeners, if they go to a URL I can give you, you can
Yeah.
put it in show notes, Brian, can get a free Dress for Health Success guidebook. And I think it's a worthy read. So that chapter is basically about our Dress for Health Success program. Doesn't include much on the labs and all the stuff you need to know, the research behind it. Getting your own data is critical. But once how you're functioning in these areas, hormones, immune, digestion, detoxification, and so on, you can tune all of that up with the Dress for Health Success program. It stands for diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. So D.R.E.S.S. That's so successful of a program. You're taking a course where that's about half the course, all of the lab work, and then there's the protocols. And we have a business section too, so people can enjoy their life, making a living doing this work. But that's really the foundation. And so I was asked to write that chapter, and I don't have much else to write about.
I'm sure you could have wrote more if you were asked, but what about, we'll just touch briefly on diet, which a lot of times is the first thing that comes up, as a health coach or even just having a health podcast. That's what we discuss a lot about. And, you have different extremes of dieting, right? From carnivore to vegan. What is the basis behind the protocol or the,
the basis is that there's no one diet that's right for everybody. And if someone says, I have the perfect diet for everybody, they're wrong. I could express that in other terms.
Yeah.
But they're wrong. And so an example is when I first started trying to help others, the Atkins diet, which was a good read, by the way, the book by Dr. Atkins. And man, it made so much sense. And it worked for me. I had energy and slept well and built muscle and all the things. But when I started recommending it to other people, some got good results. Some got no change. They felt the same, just as crappy as before. Some got worse, felt worse than before. So, oh boy, that doesn't work. Now what? So I started researching, and I ran across some very interesting books and work. I don't mind saying that William Wolcott, who wrote the Metabolic Typing Diet, was very, very instructional and constructive in helping us form our D for diet. Matter of fact, we use metabolic typing because it's as close to your genetic requirements as possible. So that's the key, is to find out your individual genetic requirements. And there's ways to use, again, everything we do is very systematized so that you can eliminate trial and error to the best of our ability. We don't want to just try this, try that, try. People are sick of try this, try that. So we have ways of collecting data that would point us in the right direction. And so it's based on genetics. Your protein, fat, and carb ratios, probably the place to start. Just getting that right will get your body producing energy on a cellular level, cellular energy at the right rate, quality, quantity. Cells don't need to be taught what their job is. They already have that innate intelligence within them.
Yeah.
So we need to fuel them correctly. And the right percentage of protein, fat, and carbs is a good place to start. And it goes on from there.
Yeah, that was something that was new to me, the metabolic typing sort of protocol or diet, however you want to explain is
diet.
Yeah, diet. Yeah. And certain people can oxidize foods differently than others, right? Whether it's, they're a fast or a slow oxidizer.
We oxidize, we burn fuel at different rates. Right. And so that means you got to get the right fuel. So if you take an Eskimo who's a very fast oxidizer, they burn fuel very quickly. And so they burn slow burning fuel like protein and mostly fat. I mean, their diet's about 80 to 90% fat, some protein, of course, and very little on the carb side. Why do they do so well on that? Well, because they're very fast oxidizers. But a slow oxidizer would die on that diet. Someone from the mountains of, up in the Andes down there in South America, who's used to eating, who's never been below 8,000 feet in their life, never seen snow in their life, being near the equator like they are. And so they would eat a lot of corn and potatoes and do very well. You feed corn and potatoes to an Eskimo, they get diabetes and die. So it's your genetics that make up your requirements. There's no one food that's right for everybody. Although I have to say there's some foods that are bad for everybody, like sugar.
Right. There's a common theme, these highly processed palatable foods wouldn't be good for an Eskimo or something, an Indian or whoever.
Catch an Indian. Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to look at diet because especially having a podcast and having different views and people have different stories. And I talk about self-experimentation, but that's one aspect of doing it. But when you're testing and you're finding out, what foods and what, metabolic type you are, it's a great way to sort of take the guessing out of it.
Yeah, there's no inherent quality in the food. It's who's eating it that matters. I mean, there are things in food, again, protein, fat, carbs, and all the micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, and so on. But it's who's eating them that matters. And so a lot of your guests, they may have talked about a diet that worked for them. And that's a beautiful thing. We're so happy you found the right diet for you. But they may not think of it in terms of protein, fat, and carb ratios, or they may have some other way of assessing it. Low oxidates, low inflammatory, no nightshades, or whatever it might be. And the testing comes in handy to get rid of some of the very irritating foods. There's other types of oral intolerances, like lactose intolerance, for instance. That's not the immune system saying you're allergic to it. It's your digestive system saying we can't break this down properly. So we're going to give you some symptoms around that, some gas, heartburn, indigestion, bloating, diarrhea, or whatever. So there's different ways to look at it, but there's no one diet that's right for everybody, but there's one that's right for you.
That's a great way to look at it. And a common question I ask a lot of individuals that come on the podcast, if you were going to give one tip to an individual who was looking to get their body or their mind back to what it once was, maybe 10, 15 years ago, what one tip would you give that individual?
Oh man, it's hard. I keep thinking of what helps me is this idea of self-awareness, and that I'm not my body and I'm not my mind and emotions. That I'm a being of another sort, and that I'm just kind of being housed in this body,
Mm-hmm.
and thoughts are accumulated just like the body. Like everything I've ever eaten probably is showing up somewhere in this physical body. Everything I've ever thought of or is somewhere in my head, but there's still that other element that's neither of those things, and it's not always easy to get in touch with. You just sort of develop that awareness, and it makes for a peaceful, happy life. It makes for joy. I can kind of go through things knowing that that's not what matters. It's might not be articulating that quite right now, but yeah, spending that time, as a spiritual being is very important, and that's not diet, that's not rest, that's not exercise or supplements or any of that stuff, but it is part of stress reduction. So in the D.R.E.S.S, stress reduction is key, and having a way of thinking, or not thinking, but way of being, can be really conducive to a more joyful life.
Yeah. I like that. That's I mean, a lot of times people will be like, oh, go for daily walks and do things and those tips, but sort of being, I guess your point is, maybe just being present, and taking time by yourself, maybe with your thoughts.
It's called doing nothing.
Yeah, doing nothing.
But I can do nothing on my motorcycle, and I can do nothing. I think walking around,
yeah,
and noticing things around and paying attention and being in the moment, that's why I'm a landscaper gardener, and I love my property. I just get so much joy from going around and seeing things growing and planting things. And mostly I buy seedlings or young plants. I don't do a lot of seeds, but I get the concept, and getting things to grow. Like my wife, we walk around, she goes, God, these plants are really happy. Because and we think they are, and it's a joyful thing. And that's my one tip. Obviously eating the right foods, and not eating the bad ones, and all that stuff matters too.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I go for probably 3 walks a day with my dogs, and it's like my favorite time of the day.
And you get some of your best ideas, right?
Yeah, best ideas. It's just like, and I don't bring my phone. I mean, there's people who are like on their phones the whole time while they're walking. I never understood that. So I just try to stay present, and I think that's it's a great tip.
And we don't judge. We don't judge.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, this was great, Reed. I appreciate you coming on. I've heard your lectures for the last however many months, and to get you on the podcast and talk about FDN and your journey, it's been great.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
I'm happy to be here anytime. If you got you want to dial in on one of these areas, because we kept it pretty broad.
Sure.
Which is, I live in that space of just trying to see everything. I run a company of 50 people, and yet, it all seems to flow and come together.
And also, I'll put the link in the show notes that you mentioned, fdntraining.com/get clean. Is that what you had it as?
The name of your
Get
podcast.
Lean. Oh, the name of okay, that's fine. I'll put it in the show notes.
In the show notes. It's there. It's in my calendar here. I forgot it too. But but yeah, so
I'll put that in, and if people want a free, what was it, a free guide?
The Dress for Health Success guide.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, and it's fdntraining.com/get lean.
Got it. Okay. It'll be in the show notes, and
Good.
And yeah, we'll also put the link to FDN in there as well. So if people want to learn about FDN and maybe,
They can just go get that booklet, and if it interests you, if you want to know more, they'll pester you somehow.
All right, Reed. Well, thank you so much.
Hey, yeah, Brian, I look forward to doing your post-grad interview with you.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Okay, buddy.
Thanks,
man.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.